So, Kati Kimchi, hello, hello. It is great to have you here. We have known each other for years, but haven't met in a long time. It is great to see you, and I will introduce you. You have been guiding, focusing, and sexuality processes for over 15 years. You are an expert in emotional and couples therapy. You are the developer and leader of a new approach to therapeutic work regarding sexuality, and we are going to discuss that matter today. You wrote the book On Focusing and Sexuality. I must say that it is an excellent book, and I will share a few of my thoughts regarding it very shortly. You have been in a relationship for more than 26 years and are a mother to 3 charming and lovely children. If it is all right with you, we will head to a short opening clip, and then we will discuss your book regarding focusing and sexuality. Welcome to the Focusing Podcast with Yarden Kerem. I am Yarden. The goal is to teach you a new language, listening to the body and how much knowledge will rise and reach the conscious through this listening. The body is an intelligent entity. If we listen, it will give us all the answers. This podcast is relevant to everyone because we all have life questions and unresolved experiences that we can understand by listening to the body. Okay, so Kati, you are releasing a book called Focusing and Sexuality. I wrote to you while I was reading the book that it is excellent. It is simply a wonderful book. I want to say that it is excellent from 3 different perspectives. First, sexuality, a dialogue. Authentic, honest, uncompromising on sexuality. Another space that I think is written excellently is focusing. It is so difficult, in my view, to write about focusing and to explain focusing. You did it wonderfully, and also regarding therapy. I think it is a simply great book, also about therapy, all the difficulties and problems that a therapist and a patient experience. And I thought to start with this, that I will read a text that for me was really like a punch to the stomach. It is a little long, but it is fascinating, so I want to say, first of all, to the people listening to the episode with Kati, I am reading from page 27, and I will show. Yes, exactly. I think it is seen backwards. Let's see. Maybe it is seen less like this, and of course, we will put the details also for contacting you, and also, of course, for purchasing the book in the details of. The podcast will be available on Spotify, YouTube, and everywhere else. And of course, wherever you'd like to share it as well. So I want to read. And from there, we will start a conversation. So the main thing that leads people to arrive at therapy for sexuality is, in most cases, a peak experience. This is the last refuge after a long period in which they understand that coping alone does not advance them. The patients arrive feeling tired and helpless, defeated and filled with criticism and self-blame. For most of them, the choice of the process is not perceived as a point of strength, but as a certificate of poverty for their inability to solve the situation or change it. Very strong. Very, and I will continue to the second paragraph. Along with the patient, a noisy group of internal parts arrives at the clinic. Despair, hope, pain, and blame that arise from their personal history. With it arrive forces that tell stories of gender and culture, stories related to multi-generational traumas within the family, and stories of partners that affect the field. These personal and collective parts enter the therapy room, lean on the armchair, and wonder where to begin. Meaning, not only does the patient arrive defeated and full of self-blame, you describe so many more of his personal self-parts that arrive, and in general. And even more, whether the partner arrives with him or not, and if there is no partner, then that itself surely comes along. My being a woman or my being a man, that is to say the whole wider space. And you add, and you also write about yourself. To sit in front of a body that contains these parts as a facilitator. As someone who is meant to be a representation of hope, healing, or change, this is a complex experience. Some voices are essential to the process, some less. Some demand attention and some are silent, but we must acknowledge them all. And we will continue. So I want to ask you, I mean, you are saying that if we are aware of all the parts, and if not, they manage the process. I mean, all the parts actually manage the process. So you describe a complexity that is really very, very big. And I thought that we would conduct the conversation according to what you wrote here, first of all. Patient arrives defeated. And in self-criticism, that is to say, it is so touching, I must say. It is not fun to arrive. You are actually saying it is not fun to come to you at the first moment. I imagine that later, yes, but they arrive with a very difficult feeling. And we will start from this. We will move to talk about self-parts. That is to say, also in the book you describe in a very touching way the most vulnerable part and the guards that exist in order not to feel it, and finally your part in the process. So if it is all right, a patient arrives to you, broken, crushed, upset, maybe feeling terribly humiliated. It is not pleasant to talk about it. How to start?
First of all, thank you for choosing this paragraph. It was moving for me to listen to it now as you echoed it back to me. Patients usually arrive, I will say for a moment, feeling very, very lonely. Because there is something in the work with sexuality. We will do a lot, some of us, those who do choose to do some emotional process work. So when we echoed, we can approach our parenting and questions related to the profession and personal development. And even some of us will work with their traumas. But we will arrive at sexuality. Usually only if there is no choice. That is to say that there is some terrible break. There is some difficulty in functioning. There is a total loss of desire. And most of the people arrive very lonely and very ashamed. And that was the thing that I marked for myself for a moment. That is to say, I identify for a moment that unlike most processes that people come to do work in relation to, sexuality is a very lonely and very shameful topic. And it rests upon.
That is to say, it is not supposed to be. I think the work that you do is to say, wait, it does not have to be this way, but it is this way.
Very deep core issues within us regarding security and communication, and truly regarding vulnerability and trauma, on boundaries and education. It is anchored very, very well to many subjects that in the end are not. Get touched. And then our work there is for a moment to give legitimacy, for a moment to give recognition, to say hello to everything that arrived. And this is the second stage, to say, look, it is complex. And here there is the intake, that is to say, the moment of acquaintance of actually with what we are working. Some of the things are very clear and spoken. Some things are very implicit. And this is what, when I teach a little how to work with this thing, this is one of the basic things that I teach, how we identify as process guides. I call it a Greek chorus, all this group that sits behind her.
A tragic question, but okay, we will go with Greek.
So it is also, there is a lot of pleasure and happiness in sexuality and a connection to life, energy and desire. You know, they are fibers of intimacy and spirituality. But truly, when someone arrives at the clinic for therapy, the majority arrive out of a broken, lonely place. I could count on one hand those who arrived because they want to maximize, because they are curious about their sexuality. It is privileged.
True.
Yes.
I want to say that you really, you emphasize something very, very important. That is to say that when arriving at the process, they arrive with the feelings probably the hardest. That is to say that they arrive at the edge. But actually, on the other side, sexuality is a wonderful thing. Sexuality is a spiritual thing. It is a thing with pleasure. It is a thing that is perhaps even holy. And we forget that. And actually, perhaps in the process that you do, you take the patients from the hardest place to a good place and hope.
And we just take into account everything, the various parts and subjects, and we are looking to understand what we should focus on more.
But I want to ask you, How do you do it? I mean, a person arrives and it is very embarrassing to talk about it. Our culture does not allow us to talk about it, or a very shallow conversation. How do you bridge that gap with a patient who arrives in a bad place, feeling hopeless? I assume they don't believe you can help initially, as it is a deeply painful and lonely experience. They arrive feeling completely broken inside. And how is it possible to open a topic that is usually not opened?
See, I break it down. I am stepping into the role of the teacher, because there are those who come to me and know that this is my specialty. I came to work on sexuality. But there are people who do processes, therapists, who say, how do I help with this topic to reach the clinic and the process naturally, without them remaining there alone in the dark? These are two separate subjects and two distinct ways of relating. Someone who comes to me already says, okay, he did work before, he checked, he said I will deal with this, or his wife sent him. Patients who want to learn from me, therapists, who want to learn from me how I work. Here there is a bit more reference to how we, as process guides, allow these topics to arrive naturally to the clinic and provide them with legitimacy and space. In both cases, the initial answer that I have for this thing is to arrive without an agenda. Because those who come to the clinic are truly very tired, very beaten down, and very accused. Even sex therapists, they have an agenda. They claim that more is important. There is the normative, there is the non-normative, there is what falls on the spectrum, there is monogamy, and there is polyamory. And many people who facilitate sexual processes have very much the
what is right and what is not right, or how it should be. Yes.
But there is no such thing. And whoever arrives to the clinic, their senses are very, very connected to whether you can really hear what is my sexuality and how is it expressed before you try to fix it or explain it to me.
I want to emphasize this because it is a lovely point, really a great point, because the perception, you wrote this, I am quoting you, the perception of all of us that passion is a wonderful thing and is to be full of passion and without problems. And actually you are saying, no, no, no. If I am without an agenda, then I don't have a north, meaning I listen to the person, and if he discovers that he without passion or don't want sexuality, or maybe she's disgusted by it. You say you didn't even write that. I'm adding everything. It's allowed, meaning if that's what you're saying.
What he needs, meaning you come to me because you want sexuality, not to disgust you, or you come to me to make peace with this place, or we are learning together for a moment what the goals of the process are, but the majority arrive with a lot of criticism, and every hint of criticism from my side immediately creates this closedness. So the first thing is simply to say for a moment, and this is again, not again, but this is the focusing in my view. It is the ability to be there with real, authentic curiosity and simply ask the thing itself. Who are you? What are you telling us now? How are you and why? When I say you, it is the sexuality, the passion, the difficulty in functioning. What do you need from us? And this is relatively radical in the world of sex therapy, because we usually tell sexuality how it should be, instead of asking it what it is saying and what it needs.
I understood. Okay. Meaning you are actually also describing that you are turning directly to the sexual organs and you are saying, come on, you talk. Meaning not the patient will talk, but the parts of yourself will talk. So I want, if it is okay, that we move to the next paragraph that you wrote about very beautifully, about the parts of the self that arrive. You are also saying, first and foremost, that if we do not touch the most vulnerable place, and if it does not open up, then there will be no change at all. True. It is a very difficult experience, but there is nothing to be done. I mean, surgery is necessary, and surgery is painful. Sorry, I love focusing so much, and I do not understand how I ended up in surgery, but it is okay. It arrived, but But the truth is that we struggle to reach that most painful place because we have so many guards and protectors. So would you mind elaborating on those guards? And the protectors, when we say that they are guarding and protecting us from meeting the painful and difficult place, maybe they are hurting us, they aren't really protecting, meaning from their perspective, they are guarding, but...
Yes, the truth of the matter is that I have started to explore working with sexuality. I simply started to specialize within what I actually learned as 1 or 2 lessons in focusing, which is the world of the guards. And I could expand on this a lot, but this is not the place. The guards are actually the code name in focusing for obstacles in the process, for parts that say, great, there is really a lot of desire to make a change and movement and to develop and to heal. And on the other hand, there is a part that is very afraid of exactly this thing, of change. Because it means we might be forced to touch places that we have chosen for years not to touch because there is pain. The work with focusing allows some kind of very, very delicate unraveling of this thing, but it requires holding of all this field of the guards. The guards will arrive in all kinds of ways. Sometimes they are very blunt. They will simply stop the process. A patient will not arrive. A patient will stop the process. A patient will disconnect in the middle, as if sleeping. Sometimes they are very subtle. Moments of flooding, and flooding is not subtle but chatter. A lot of chatter, needing to get up a lot for the bathroom, meaning something that does not want us to deepen. And throughout the years, I understood that the heart of the matter is this part, because we are on the brake pedal. We will not move anywhere if we don't look at it a little. At the end of the day, the body wants to create healing and change. You don't need a lot of gas. You just need to lift the foot from the brake pedal, and how we do that. And then I learned a bit like to spread them, meaning there are the guards that are really very personal. From my own personal and private process, the trauma, the childhood, and the religion, education that I received, there are obstacles that are connected in the couple in places where there is already complexity in the sexual communication within the relationship or injury. This is more constellative. There are obstacles that are really a bit more cultural, messages, unconscious, that we received, and I as a woman, why being sexual is dangerous, it is not legitimate, it is shameful. I slowly learned to know the patient and the parts, these inside him, that actually I really want to hear. They say what doesn't speak behaves. I want to talk to them. I want them to stop managing the system and behaving and creating pathologies or symptoms or phobias, and they will start to talk with me and with the patient in the clinic and tell me their point of view. Why really? Is it not worth healing the sexuality? What in their point of view is so dangerous? And these moments of another conversation with one such and another understanding such, first of all, it is spacious and it is wonderful, the feeling, the insights that arrive from this place, and then also we can understand from the point of view of the obstacles. They first say, why not? And sometimes when sitting and talking with them, you can ask, what will help you to trust this person? To trust in his sexuality and in his wisdom, so that they can really make a change, so they can meet the pleasure they are looking for. I ask the guard, not the part that arrived to the process. And from there we understand best what the next step to the process is. The guardians are the ones who will actually tell us how to move, and how to move wisely within the construction of healthy sexuality, adapted to the rhythm and to the internal constellation of the patient.
And you are actually working with the guardians and with the part that came to therapy. And let's just emphasize that the part that came to therapy is the part that wants to move forward, and the guardians are the ones that stop. So there is a dialogue all the time with the parts. And do you find that they are in conflict with each other, that they communicate?
These are the two distinct parts. One side wants the change, and the other side does not want the change. Now, in the work of sexuality, the beauty in it is that because focusing is a somatic tool, we slowly understand how the guardians work from within. There are really pathologies, there are really functional problems, and there are diseases that are related to sexuality. And there is dryness and disconnection, and there is no desire. We slowly also learn somatically what happens when we work with them in the clinic and start to identify how they change in real time inside the body. Sexuality is an experience, a feeling. It is not just emotional therapy. And then the patients also learn with you the signs, internal, of the stops. And the whole language changes.
Actually, you are saying what we are saying, that every symptom, in this case, a symptom of difficulty in sexuality, is a partial self that guards or is afraid or has something to say. It is not by chance that there is a symptom, but there is a story there. And therefore, we do not want to see it as a problem, but actually a gate through which we can understand the story.
You phrased that perfectly. Yes.
So, Kati, maybe you will tell us about yourself, how you reached the subject, and how for you to work with a subject so complex and difficult. How you reached, you can also tell how you reached focusing actually, and also to the connection between the two things.
Okay. The truth is, first of all, I will say something about the fact that it is comfortable for me to talk about sexuality. And it has always been a space I loved to explore. It was comfortable for me to explore it. In my previous incarnation, I was a journalist reporter, and actually also that was my specialization.
Let's just say that in the previous life, we meant the same thing. Before you were working as a focusing therapist in a field like this, it was possible to think.
I wrote about relationships, about sexuality, about desire, about tips. I wrote in Mentor magazine, in Wynette. And I arrived at focusing. I arrived through Rona Ranan Shafria, whom I met by chance. We had a prior acquaintance. She told me, "Come to me to the clinic." I had there some professional dilemma. And well, Rona is truly a companion.
We should mention Rona wrote an interesting book on focusing and creativity.
True.
And Rona was also a journalist for quite a few years.
And she actually opened for me the gate, that is to say, in the meeting with her, simply my jaw dropped. Suddenly, I understood that there is a language that I did not know, and that it is the language of mine. And then I enrolled in a course that Rona was teaching, and later I studied with Dana Ganaher, and I just kept going. I could not stop, to be honest. And at some stage I said to them, "Listen, I must meet the person who made a connection between focusing to sexual therapy, because it is mind-blowing."
Wait, let me finish. Then you found nothing and I found nothing.
And that was completely illogical because, it is a very old therapeutic tool that has already been linked to trauma and working with children and with creativity and dreams.
Business, spirituality, health.
Exactly. But sexuality? In that period also, it was some kind of renaissance cute like that. A lot of senior teachers arrived to Israel. Robert Lee, Glenn Fleisch, Van Weiser Cornell. Yes, I was the one who brought them.
That was when I was obsessed with bringing in teachers. It looks like prehistory, but it is not that many years back, maybe 15 years or so.
And
it was fun, yes.
It is not, it was perfect. People really developed and wonderful teachers. There was only thirst to receive from them more. And with each one of them, I asked and I spoke. I said, "Please connect me to the world. Where is it?" No one. That is really it. I mean, that was the sign for me to... Okay. And from there, because again, sexuality is a subject that is very alive in me, I connected to the truth that I won 3 partners for regular focusings, sometimes even more. And we started to explore together. And I developed my clinic, and I started to teach, and I continued to explore. And slowly, slowly, I understood what there is here actually. The focusing is simply a perfect tool for this exploration because it is so delicate and sensitive and respectful. It has no therapeutic agenda. There is a lot of togetherness and curiosity. And this is exactly what sexuality, which is a very ashamed subject that is found in our shadows, that mostly feels broken or flawed, this is what it needs in order to emerge. Now, focusing is also somatic. Our bodies and our subconscious minds communicate all of this energy in a manner that is far more miraculous than we could ever possibly articulate ourselves. There, and from there, simply I paved for years of exploration. Eventually, only if this I worked, I am still only if this working in the clinic. And slowly the book was actually born because some understandings that I really loved were phrased for me. That is to say, I also felt that there are things that are similar in certain subjects. Work with certain sexual injuries, images, and slowly I simply started to phrase it for myself. And at some stage, being a teacher also, I started to write it more also for students.
Let us just explain to the people listening that you wrote about the guardians in a very interesting way. That is to say, there is always much more than what can be written, but you gave a very beautiful and deep explanation about all kinds of guardians that arrive.
True.
Usually, I will tell from the experience, very personal of mine, that I once very surprised to meet huge guard dogs that stand and guard. I was in shock because we always talk about guard dogs, and I never imagined it would arrive in a session. Never arrived to me animals in any session. I'm focusing quantities like you. This you know, and it was very surprising, the concept guard dogs. So you did not write about guard dogs. I am telling
Robert
what?
Lee coined that term.
Guard dogs.
This is the term that Robert Lee coined.
Yes, I was in shock to see that an image simply arrived, two standing and saying, you are not passing like this, like this. So I am like participating. The focusing, I do not remember on what it was, but it was a complete surprise. And you like took this thing of the guard dogs that for me were really two like that standing. However, you provided a very detailed and interesting explanation. The cave, the wall.
Exactly, because slowly I understood that there is a difference. Again, it is very niche. It is for focusers who also work with images. There is a massive difference between a stopper that acts like a dam and one that is just a rag doll. There is a stop that is actually a wall, and there is a stop that is a bubble or an entrance to a labyrinth or a cliff. And when working with sexual injuries, there is much subtext in these types of stops. Because we work with focusing, and there are materials that are sometimes unconscious, my goal is not to interpret, like to learn a little more how to work with the specific person and with the specific image that arrived. I was so incredibly moved by it that I eventually decided to include it as an appendix to the book, because I truly feel it is only for the dedicated, but it absolutely fascinated me.
Yes, that is actually quite interesting. I do have a small disagreement with you, but you know what? Let us move past the experts and start to wrap things up. First of all, maybe we should explain the concept of a block. We are talking about life energy, meaning if there were no traumas, which never happens, our life energy would just flow forward until it hits a block, until something arrives that brings you to a halt. And this specific stop related to sexuality is what you meet in the clinic, and you realize these are the true blocks. And what is really quite interesting is that the focusing adds for us that this is not just some abstract idea or a limiting belief, but it is truly a physical experience that you can actually have. However, that physical experience naturally encompasses our beliefs, thoughts, memories, feelings, and various images. I also frequently come across the experience of the doll in my work. And during the encounters I had with this rag doll that you can just throw around like that. In my own personal experience, these are truly difficult moments in the clinic, but I never experienced it as a barrier, but rather as the most vulnerable part, That is to say, women who have been hurt have this experience of being
Me.
treated that way. So just for the sake of philosophizing for a moment.
No, I am with you. We have no argument about this at all. To me, she is just a rag doll. She is a guardian, and she brings truly overwhelming moments. It already reveals something about the nature of the trauma and the harm that was there. And it also preserves in some way. There are changes, whether it is a puppet on strings or if it is Raggedy Ruth. There are all kinds of these, and then we just need to sit and listen to the doll. These are difficult moments in the clinic, but regarding it as a guardian, I agree with you. It is not a classic barrier. It is not like a cliff or swamp or it's a wall, but I added a backpack to mine too, or a rock on the back, because these things tell us. Very problematic. Also, an inner child, by the way. I included him in the world of guardians.
Which can also be the most vulnerable part.
Exactly. And it really slows down the process. It is usually the slowest part. Asking to be very slow, so maybe he doesn't stop, but... Hold on a second. Yes, I am sort of doing this leaning back pose, but I am saying, okay, 1 second. We stay with him now. So it is not really a stop, but it is like an invitation to slow down and to be very sensitive and very attentive.
With gentleness and sensitivity regarding the inner child, who is perhaps the most vulnerable part, or maybe not, as everyone has their own language. Let us mention Anne Weiser Cornell, whom we both respect so much for the immense work she did in the world of focusing, that she said we cannot go faster than the slowest part within us.
Exactly. Now I want to add here some kind of thing that in the context of sexuality, we often meet the inner child. Which is interesting, I don't know, I don't have some kind of, this is not an in-depth academic study. But with men, the inner child, we will often meet him in the context of meeting the sexual organ, which differs from women. When we are with women, we are able to encounter younger inner parts of ourselves. But mostly in the womb, we meet the wise woman, which is the opposite of an inner child. She is the opposite. She is the part of inspiration, of creation, of the developed woman. And in the genitals, it is very dependent on which part we will meet in the sexual organ. But it is much less distinct than the connection men have to the sexual organ and the childlike voice that arises from it, asking to be soft and vulnerable, to the same degree that it can be powerful and leading. And the question often in the clinic, which I feel is implied, comes in moments about this. Will you stay with me, and will you respect and love me, even if I am soft and vulnerable in these areas, in the areas of my masculinity? And there is work with an inner child, which is truly linked to the initiation into healthy masculinity. I meet this through meeting the genitals.
We are going to create a closing clip and take a breath. What you said was truly touching. We really did not consider the men who also find it very difficult to come forward and speak about these things. But obviously it is quite difficult for women as well. However, this work is certainly meant for men too, and it provides a place for their whole inner world and all its archetypes. That a man comes with all his difficulties. Let us go to a closing summary, just a moment. In Israel today, many systems are collapsing. People need to find a way to be with themselves, whether in a vulnerable place or a good place, but with a hunger for more. The contents of this podcast are the contents that can provide an answer, and therefore I ask you to pass it on to whoever these things might interest. Please keep on pushing. Thank you for listening, and pay attention to your body and life forces. So, Kati Kimchi, it was fascinating for me. I am checking with you if there is a sentence that you want to say something to finish. Maybe we will say that you are also a therapist and also a teacher, as you said, and also wrote the book that we will provide details for.
Yes, And I am simply grateful for this opportunity, one moment, to lay these things out. I know sexuality is a topic that gets less of a stage. So thank you for this place, and I hope that more and more people will get to do a brave and healthy journey there. I think that it is one of the sources most immediate for change. Change, and also in general and externally. Yes.
Yes, it is. Very, very good. A really interesting final chord to end on. You come to address sexuality, but since everything is connected, so if there is movement here, there is movement in life.
In life and in society, I really feel it in relationships and the relationships between men and women, and so on. So yes, thank you.
So let us just finish. Well done on writing the book and on being a pioneer in focusing on sexuality, a topic you discovered no one wrote about, and you took it in a big way, a very respectful, delicate, and impressive way. Kati, thank you.
Thank
Thanks.
you.